This particular video is going to cover what we do to allow us to shoot and to have an explosion at the end of where our say, photon torpedo or whatever it is explodes. First thing, let's go back quickly and look at our screen. We've got a picture screen here, and I'm just going to mention something I'd like you to put into your little space game, and that is we have boundaries here. Now we have movement, but in this movement, if you keep going up, you'll just keep going right off the screen, and that's not a good thing. So I'm going to suggest, and I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do this, but I think you can figure it out easily enough. You just have to ask yourself, when you're moving up, what don't you want the coordinate to be? Well, basically, you don't want it to be less than 0, or actually even 0. Now remember, on any figure that we talk about, the coordinate for that figure, those little circles we're doing, is in the upper left-hand corner of a square that encloses the figure, or a rectangle that encloses the figure. So it's the upper left-hand corner. So going up, we're fine to 0, but coming down, we don't want it to go any lower than 0 plus the height of our figure. Because the upper left-hand corner, if it went there, you'd see the figure disappear off the screen. You see, and that you don't want. All right, likewise, going left and right. If we were going left, the upper left-hand corner, we just don't want it to go lower than 0. But going right, we don't want it to go higher than the coordinate of the upper left-hand corner plus the width. So you see, we've got to take that into account, the fact that the upper left-hand corner is really our anchor point of the figure we're moving, and that we have to do an appropriate if statement to stop that. Now, where in the code would the if statement be placed? Well, every time you make a movement in some direction, you need to check that direction to see if it's beyond the limit. And then if it is, then you have two choices of resetting the x or the y coordinate. If it's going this way, it's the x coordinate. If it's going this way, it's the y coordinate. You have two choices of resetting it. You can either reset it back to its maximum where it was before, or you can set it to 0, which means what you'd get is wrap around. It would come in from the other side. And likewise, we went up off the top, wrap around, set it to the coordinate down here, and come in off the bottom. So those are some things to think about. And I'd like you to put those limitations in so you can't run this thing too far off the screen. Alright, with that in mind, let's go in. We want to do some firing now. We want to make sure our spaceships can fire at one another. So let's see. To understand that, we have to understand a little graphics. But first of all, let's take a look at what we added as far as variables. Okay, now here is what we had up to this point. All of this up here. This was their movement. These were the two coordinates of the ship right here, x and y for one ship, and then these are two coordinates for the other ship. I'm only going to show you one ship, and I'm going to expect you to use the same thing and think it through for another ship. But here are the variables. We've got B set fire F, that would be for the filled in figure, and B set fire. And I think I don't do the filled in thing. I think I just do the open figure. So basically this is the ones I'm using, and I started doing for both, and then I decided, no, you should do a little thinking on this and try and get the second one in. It's going to be the same way, it's just you're going to have to watch and put the correct coordinates in. I would suggest using F for filled in and nothing here for the open figure. So let's see, I've got a few things here. I've got B set fire, fire direction, blast, and B set blast. I blast and B set blast. The I's are integers, the B's are Boolean. So I had to set up 2 Boolean variables to do this. I had to set up 3 integers to do this. And the reason is that we're going to use loops. Alright, we could do this in a number of ways. We could perhaps not necessarily need to have the Boolean, and we could set the loops separately on different keys, but you know, that would get rid of just this one variable. And by putting this one variable in, the fire direction, I can use one key for direction, and what it does is every time you move, it sets a direction. So let's look at that first. Alright? So looking at that, we're going to come down to this code right here. This is the code, which basically is the movement code you already have in there. And notice I added this much to it. Okay? Now you're going to have another fire direction for the other one, which is down here. And you will need basically to put a fire direction B maybe, or F maybe for fill. And you can use, I don't use this, yeah, you can use the same numbers, I suppose, if you use a different case statement down in the graphics. But this basically sets the direction that you're going to fire. And in doing that, it sets up things in a certain manner. Alright, so let's see. I'm going to set this in here, and when I set this in here, I've got the keys S again. I've got a case statement here. And when the S key is hit, that's going to fire. So what's the first thing it does? Well, in the form load, I've already set this thing to false, meaning that fire doesn't happen. You'll see why I need to do that, because everything's done in the drawing in the graphics section. So we're going to have to do a lot of drawing now in the graphics section. We'll come to that in a minute. But I've got to set up this Boolean variable here to tell it we've just hit the fire key. Draw the fire stuff. Draw the bullets in the blast. So it's going to hit the fire key, and it's going to draw the bullet. And now I'm going to loop, and I use my iFire as the variable for my loop variable. And I put me here because it was giving me a little indicator that I should either use a very local variable, and I really didn't want to declare anything right up here. So what I did is I basically used the form, the me variable. So it's a me iFire. It's the variable right up at the top that we've already declared. And I do it from 1 to 100. This is the length or the range of my missile, basically, how far it's going. And I jump in steps of 2, so it goes at a reasonable speed across there. You can cut it down to 1 if you want to, or you can speed it up, depending on how you want to do. And every time I add a bit, I go and refresh, and you'll see what I refresh. Basically, since this variable said it's going to draw something special now. And then I keep getting my next fire. And as you know, we have a loop here, so we'll basically be doing this loop 50 times, since I'm jumping by 2s. And each time, the iFire is going to get changed. Then after that, I set the blast to be true, which allows me to do the blast and no longer continue this fire stuff. And so the blast gets set to true, and then what happens is I do steps 1 to 50 in steps of 2, which is basically 25 circles I'm drawing that down below, and you'll see that in a minute. And I refresh the screen each time. So this is just a bunch of refreshes, but this is the fire. Whenever I hit this fire button, that's what's going to happen. And then as soon as I'm finished with the blast, I come down and set them both to false so we can go on and move again. Because as long as this first one, or this one right here, as long as the fire one is set to true, we can't move. It'll just go through and draw the fire one. You'll need to do the same thing with perhaps the 5 key on the number pad down here. You'll need to set another one. See, I've got it set down here for you for this demonstration, but I decided not to fill it in because basically you'll be using other variables and you'll be doing this same code down here, but with the variables for the filled in one. Alright, so in that case, let's go see what we need to do in graphics. Now, whenever you're drawing on a screen, you know we have a graphics routine. We've done this in the first one where we set it in there. But now we've greatly expanded this graphics routine, haven't we? We had our brush, and this is basically the movement stuff up in here. Right here is the movement stuff, right? We get our pens, we get all this stuff. So we got our graphics, our ellipse, and all that. But now we've added something. We've added this section here. And if you're doing the other one, you're probably going to have to add 2 of these sections there. Here's how it works. Depending on the fire direction, you see. So inside this if statement, if the fire is set, if we've hit the fire button, whenever it refreshes, it'll come down here, and yes, it will refresh the drawing. We need to have the ships refreshed each time, because remember, it erases the whole screen every time it refreshes. So the ships do need to be redrawn. And then what happens? Well, the first thing that happens is this thing's going to change and draw a line. All right? So let's take a look at this. We come to the fire direction. Depending on which direction we go depends on which one of these cases we do. The cases are set up for each direction we're aimed. And of course I've got 4 of them here. Remember I requested that you do 8 directions of movement, so you'll probably have to do 8 of them down here in each of your variables. Alright, so I would suggest get one set up correctly, and then basically copy and paste and fill in the differences. Alright, once we've done that, we have an if statement in here to see whether it's the bullet, it's the missile going out, or whether it's the blast at the end that needs to be drawn. If it's the missile going out, in other words, if blast is false, we come down and we draw a line. And notice each time we're going to use red here. I just set the red. And we are going to draw the line longer and longer, because look at where I-fire is. This particular one right here basically takes the coordinates of the ship, adds 5 to it. Now think about it. Why did I add or subtract 5? Why did I add 5? It looks like I added 5 all the way down here. Why did I add 5? Well, again, the coordinate of the ship tells us where the upper left-hand corner of the ship is. We want the fire to appear to be coming to the middle. And since up here the ships are basically 10 by 10, halfway over and halfway down, which would be the middle of the ship, is 5. So that's why I added the 5 to each one. That gets us to the coordinates of the middle of the ship from the upper left-hand corner. Now what do I want to do? Well, I want to add or subtract the I-fire, the amount of length the line is. So this part right here in each one of these, notice, adds on the first one, subtracts to the Y on the second one. So that means on this one, we're going down, we're firing down. On this one, we are firing up, okay? On this one, we are right here, we're subtracting it from the X, which means we're firing left. And on this one, we're adding it to the X, so that means we're firing right. So those are the firing directions. And they're dependent on just exactly what direction it was last moving, which we set up in the movement section. After the line gets to its full extent, we then set the blast to true. So now when it comes down through here, it'll do the first one. And we're basically going to do filled circles, getting larger and larger and larger in radius, you see? And again, we set the blast to 1/2 here, and that allows the blast to center in the middle of where we're doing it. Okay? So each circle, as it gets larger and larger in radius, it'll be centered on the middle, and that's why the -1/2 in this case on these. Okay, and where is it here? Here we go, -1/2 blast, -1/2 blast. Alright, so that allows us to center in there, and they keep getting larger and larger depending on the blast, you see. And as the blast increases in size, the I blast is a loop variable. As it increases in size, it creates a larger and larger circle. So it appears to be going out as an explosion. Now, I don't know whether this movie capture system will work fast enough, but I think it's time we probably take a look at the effect. Folks, don't expect Hollywood here. This is just a basic game. I'm just trying to show you the basics. So we're going to go to the Zymo. We're going to go ahead and run this thing, I hope. Looks like I'm going to error out, isn't it? No, maybe. Come on. Yes, it's running, and there are my ships. Alright, so let's see if I can do a movement here. Here goes this one up. This is the one that's going to do the firing. Okay, here it goes down. And it's going slower, I think, because I'm recording. I'm going to get it over there. I'm going to fire. Let's see. If I fire now, I'll be firing down, right? There it goes. Boom. Okay, let's go over this direction. And I think I'm in range. Fire. Oh, I missed him. Let's go back here a little bit. Down a little more. Back. Okay, now forward, fire. Ah, got him pretty good. Let's go back a little further. Now if I fire this direction, watch. It fires the other direction because that's the last direction I moved, okay? Let's go forward one and fire. Got him. Beautiful shot. Okay, now on the next video I'm going to show you how to do hits, but for right now you need to get both of your ships set up to fire in all 8 directions. You should have them at this time moving, and I should have checked that off already. And then you should get ready to have them fire in all 8 directions with the little circular explosion. It is possible to use kind of little pictures here and have small picture boxes with pictures in them, and you can have transparent backgrounds to that picture box, and so that you can actually make an explosion type thing and make it larger and larger and larger, and so it looks like a real explosion there. We're not going to go that far. There's a lot of things you can do. You can also use little pictures for the ships too. That's a little tougher. Alright? But I think if you get this, you got the basic idea of movement and game explosion. And using the built-in graphics is the simplest way we can do this. So now your assignment basically is to add fire in all 8 directions and explosions in all 8 directions. In the next video, we'll talk about keeping score and registering hits.